12 warriors stood in a circle, muscles gleaming under the afternoon sun, each one a monument of strength and battle scars. But the Apache girl wasn't looking at any of them. Her eyes locked on someone who shouldn't have been there at all. A cowboy, thin, scarred, standing at the edge of the gathering like a shadow that forgot to disappear. No one had invited him to compete. No one had even acknowledged he existed. Yet when her father asked who she chose, her finger rose slowly, trembling, and pointed directly at him. The warriors turned as one, confusion rippling through their faces, then hardening into something darker. This wasn't how the ritual worked. This wasn't possible. 3 days earlier, Levi Holloway had ridden into the isolated Apache settlement with nothing but a half-cent starved horse and a bag of trade goods he'd spent 2 months gathering. The settlement sat in a valley ringed by redstone cliffs, hidden from the territories where most folks lived. He came here twice a year, always keeping his head down, trading quietly for the things he needed to survive another season alone. The Apache tolerated him because he never caused trouble, never asked questions, never stayed longer than necessary. He was a ghost passing through their world, but this time was different. When he arrived at the trading post, he found the entire settlement gathered in the central clearing. 12 men stood in formation, each one radiating power and certainty. They wore war paint and ceremonial dress, muscles tense with anticipation. Levi recognized what this was immediately, a choosing ceremony. The chief's daughter would select her husband from among the strongest warriors in the region. It was an honor that tribes fought over, a moment that determined alliances and futures. Levi started to turn his horse around. This wasn't his business. He didn't belong anywhere near something this sacred. But then he saw her. Kiona, the chief's daughter. He'd seen her before on his previous visits, always from a distance, always in passing. But today, she stood at the center of everything, dressed in white deer skin decorated with turquoise beads, her long black hair braided with feathers. Her face was painted with red ochre in ceremonial patterns. She should have looked like a prize being displayed. Instead, she looked trapped. Their eyes met across the clearing just for a second, maybe less, but in that fragment of time, something passed between them that Levi couldn't name. Recognition, maybe, or the ghost of recognition, as if they'd met before, though he knew they never had. In a world where cowboys and Apache daughters could know each other at all, her eyes widened slightly, as if she'd seen something in his face that startled her. Then someone blocked his view and the moment shattered. Levi dismounted and tied his horse near the trading post, planning to wait until the ceremony ended, but he couldn't make himself leave. Something kept him rooted there, watching from the shadows at the edge of the gathering. The 12 warriors began their displays one by one. Takekoda went first, the biggest of them all. Standing nearly 7 feet tall with shoulders like a bull, he performed a series of combat movements, then lifted a boulder that would have crushed most men. The crowd cheered. The other warriors followed, each demonstrating their strength, their skill with weapons, their worthiness. Levi looked down at his own hands, scarred from old burns, thin from too many meals skipped, calloused from work, but not war. He didn't belong here. He belonged nowhere. But when he looked up again, Kiona was staring directly at him, not glancing, staring. Her father stood beside her, speaking in their language, gesturing to the warriors. She nodded at her father's words, but her eyes never left Levi's face. The other warriors noticed. Takekoda turned, following her gaze, and his expression darkened when he saw what held her attention. A murmur rippled through the crowd. People were starting to notice where the chief's daughter was looking. Kuruk the chief raised his hand for silence. He spoke in heavily accented English loud enough for everyone to hear. My daughter will choose now. One man here will join our family. One will become her husband and a warrior of our people." The 12 warriors straightened, each one certain he would be chosen. Takakota stepped forward slightly, a smile already forming. This was a formality. Everyone knew he would be selected. Kiona's hand rose slowly. The clearing fell completely silent. Even the wind seemed to hold its breath. Her finger trembled as it lifted, and for a moment Levi thought she would point it to Koda like everyone expected. But her finger moved past the warriors, past all 12 of them, and pointed directly at him. The shock hit like a physical wave. Warriors froze mid-breath. The crowd erupted in confused murmurs. Kuruk's face went pale, then flushed with something between anger and disbelief. Takakota turned fully toward Levi now, and his expression promised violence. Levi couldn't move, couldn't breathe. This had to be a mistake. She couldn't mean him, but Kiona's hand stayed raised, steady now, pointing at him like an arrow finding its target. Her voice carried across the clearing, clear and unwavering. "Him. I choose him." And that's when everything broke apart. The silence lasted exactly 3 heartbeats. Then chaos erupted. Takakota moved first, his massive frame closing the distance between himself and Levi in 4 long strides. His hand went to the knife at his belt, fingers wrapping around the carved bone handle. The other warriors followed, forming a wall of muscle and rage between Kiona and the cowboy who'd somehow stolen what belonged to them. Voices rose in angry shouts, some in English, most in their own language, but the meaning was clear in any tongue. This was an insult, a violation impossible. Levi's hand instinctively moved toward his hip, but he wasn't wearing a gun. He'd left it with his horse, knowing better than to bring weapons into an Apache ceremony. Now he stood defenseless as 12 of the most dangerous men he'd ever seen advanced on him, with murder in their eyes. His mouth went dry, his burned hand trembled at his side. Kuruk's voice cut through the noise like a blade. "Stop!" The warriors froze, but their fury remained visible in every tense muscle, every clenched jaw. Takakota stood closest to Levi, near enough that the cowboy could smell the bare grease in his hair, could see the old battle scars crossing his chest. The warrior's eyes promised that this wasn't over. Not by a long distance. The chief walked slowly toward his daughter, his weathered face unreadable. When he spoke, his voice was low, but carried to every corner of the clearing. "Kiona, explain this choice." She stood perfectly still, her hand finally lowering to her side, but her eyes remained fixed on Levi, as if looking away might break whatever fragile thread connected them. "I saw him 6 months ago, father, at the river crossing near the red cliffs." Levi's mind raced back. 6 months, the river. He'd been tracking a lost calf that had wandered from his small herd. He'd found it trapped in mud near the water. Spent 3 hours in the freezing current, digging it free with his bare hands while his burned skin screamed in protest. He'd been alone, or thought he'd been alone. I watched him save an animal that most men would have abandoned. Kiona continued. He nearly drowned, trying to free something that had no value to anyone but itself. When he finally pulled it to shore, he sat in the mud for a long time, just breathing, not celebrating, not proud, just tired and hurt and alone. She paused, and for the first time her voice wavered slightly. I saw the scars on his hands even from a distance. Burns that looked old but still painful. Later I learned he got them trying to save his family's barn when he was younger. He failed that day and lost everything, but he never stopped trying to save things. That is who he is. Her voice strengthened. I saw something in his face that day, something these warriors don't carry. Weakness. Takakota spat the word like poison. Kindness. Kiona corrected her voice, hardening. the strength to suffer for something that cannot repay you, the courage to keep going when no one is watching to praise you for it. Kuruk's expression remained stone. This man is not Apache. He is not a warrior. He cannot protect you. He protected a helpless animal when he could barely protect himself. Kiona replied, "That is the man I choose to build a life with." The chief looked at Levi for a long moment, studying him the way a hunter studies tracks in the dirt. Finally, he spoke directly to the cowboy. "Do you accept this choice?" Levi's throat felt like it was full of sand. Every instinct screamed at him to refuse, to run, to get as far from this situation as possible. Takakota and the others would kill him the first chance they got. Even if Kuruk allowed this, the tribe would never accept him. This was madness. But Kiona was still looking at him with those dark eyes. And something in her gaze made him feel seen for the first time in years. Seen and somehow understood. Not pied, not judged, just seen. Yes, he heard himself say, "I accept." Takakota's roar of rage echoed off the red cliffs as the warrior lunged forward. And this time, no one moved fast enough to stop him. Levi didn't see the fist coming. He only felt the explosion of pain across his jaw, the ground rushing up to meet him, the taste of blood filling his mouth. His vision blurred. Somewhere above him, Takakota was shouting in his language, words that needed no translation. The warrior's boot drew back for another strike. Enough. Kuruk's command carried the weight of absolute authority. Two other warriors grabbed Takakota's arms, pulling him back. The massive man fought against them for a moment, then went still, chest heaving with barely controlled rage. Levi pushed himself to his hands and knees, spitting blood into the dirt. His jaw felt like it might be broken. He'd taken beatings before, plenty of them. But Takakota hit like a landslide. Through the ringing in his ears, he heard the chief speaking. "Our tradition is sacred. When a woman makes her choice, it is final. No man may challenge it." Kuruk's voice was iron. "But tradition also demands proof of worth. If this outsider claims my daughter, he must prove he deserves what these warriors have earned through years of dedication to our people." Levi managed to get to his feet. Swaying slightly, the world tilted and settled. Kiona had moved closer, her face tight with concern, but her father's hand on her shoulder kept her from approaching. Takakota smiled, and it was the most dangerous expression Levi had ever seen. 3 trials, the way our ancestors demanded when warriors from other tribes sought to join us. 3 tests of strength, courage, and will. He gestured at Levi's thin frame, his scarred hands, his borrowed boots. If he fails even one, he leaves, and the woman chooses again from those who belong here. The other warriors murmured approval. This was familiar ground. This made sense in a way Kiona's choice didn't. Tests could be measured. Strength could be proven or disproven. The natural order could be restored. Kuruk studied Levi for a long moment. The outsider may refuse the trials. He can leave now, and no harm will come to him beyond what has already been done. It was an escape. A clean way out of a situation that would probably get him killed. Levi looked at Kiona. She hadn't moved, but something in her expression reminded him of that calf trapped in the mud. Helpless, but fighting. Terrified, but not broken. What are the trials? His voice came out rougher than he intended, thick from the blood in his mouth. Takakota's smile widened. First trial begins at dawn tomorrow, the test of endurance. You will carry stones up the cliff path. Same number as each of us carries, same distance, same time limit. He gestured to the red cliffs rising behind the settlement, their faces steep and unforgiving. If you fall behind, you fail. If you drop your stones, you fail. If you stop to rest, you fail. Levi looked up at those cliffs. They rose at least 300 ft, the path barely visible from this distance. He'd seen goats struggle on slopes gentler than that. And he'd be carrying weight while warriors twice his size did the same. Second trial, he asked. You'll learn when you survive the first. Takakota stepped closer, lowering his voice so only Levi could hear. You won't, I'll make certain of it. And when you're crawling in the dirt, broken and humiliated, she'll see what you truly are. Weak, worthless, nothing. The warrior turned and walked away, the others following. The crowd began to disperse, voices low with speculation and doubt. Kuruk approached Levi, his expression unreadable. You should leave before dawn. The chief said quietly, This will not end the way you hope. Then he too turned away, guiding Kiona back toward the center of the settlement. She looked back once, and Levi saw fear in her eyes. Not fear of the trials. Fear of what would happen when he failed them. Levi touched his swelling jaw and watched the sun sink toward the horizon. He had maybe 12 hours to figure out how to survive something designed to destroy him. Dawn arrived cold and merciless. Levi stood at the base of the cliff path, his legs already trembling from a sleepless night. The 12 warriors assembled beside him, each one carrying a leather sling loaded with stones. Takakota held his load as if it weighed nothing. Muscles relaxed, breathing easy. The others looked equally unconcerned. They'd done this before, many times. Kuruk approached with a sling for Levi. The cowboy took it, and the weight nearly pulled him to his knees. 40 lb, maybe 50. The leather straps cut into his shoulders immediately. His burned hand screamed as he gripped the support rope. The path rises 300 ft. Kuruk announced to the gathered crowd, You will climb to the marker stone at the summit. Touch it and return. Any man who drops his stones is eliminated. Any man who stops moving for more than the time it takes to draw 3 breaths is eliminated. He looked directly at Levi. Any man who falls dies. The path was barely 2 ft wide in places, carved into the red stone by water and time. No railings, no safety, just exposed rock face and a long drop to the valley floor below. Takakota moved to stand beside Levi close enough that their shoulders almost touched. I'm going to enjoy watching you fall, he whispered. The chief raised his hand, then dropped it. The warriors surged forward as one, their legs pumping, stones secure on their backs. They moved with practiced efficiency, feet finding purchase on the narrow path, bodies leaning into the climb. Levi stumbled after them, his boots slipping on loose gravel. Within minutes, the gap between him and the last warrior had grown to 20 ft, then 30. His lungs burned. The stones felt like they were growing heavier with each step, the straps digging deeper into his shoulders. Sweat poured down his face. Despite the cold morning air, the burned skin on his hand cracked open where he gripped the rope, fresh blood making it slippery. Halfway up, his right foot slipped. For one horrible moment, he teetered on the edge, stones pulling him backward toward empty space. His arms windmilled. The crowd below gasped. Then his left hand shot out and caught a jutting rock. Steadying him, he pressed his forehead against the stone wall, breathing hard, waiting for his heart to stop trying to burst through his ribs. Above him, the warriors were pulling away. Takakota glanced back and smiled, then deliberately kicked loose a shower of stones that rained down on Levi. The cowboy had to flatten himself against the cliff face, protecting his head while sharp edges cut his arms. He wanted to quit. Every fiber of his body screamed at him to turn around, to accept defeat, to get off this mountain before it killed him. But then he looked down at the settlement below and saw a figure in white. Standing alone, watching Kiona. Even from this distance, he could feel her gaze on him. Levi forced his legs to move one step, then another. His vision narrowed to just the path directly in front of him. Nothing else existed, not the warriors ahead, not the drop behind, just the next handhold, the next footfall. The burned skin on his hand tore completely open. Blood ran down his wrist, hot and slick. He switched the rope to his left hand, but that one was weaker, and the stones shifted dangerously. His shoulder muscles felt like they were tearing away from the bone. 200 FD up, he realized. He'd closed the gap. The last warrior was only 10 FD ahead now. The man glanced back, surprised, then pushed harder. But Levi had found something the warriors hadn't accounted for. They were strong. Yes, powerful, but they'd never had to survive on nothing. Never had to push through pain that should have killed them. Never had to keep going when every logical reason said to stop. Levi had every day of his life. The summit marker appeared through his blurred vision. The warriors were already there, touching the stone, beginning their descent. Takakota stood beside the marker, waiting. His smile faded when he saw Levi still climbing. The cowboy's hand reached the marker stone, touched it. For one brief moment, he allowed himself to stop, to breathe, to feel the impossible fact that he'd made it. Then Takakota stepped directly into his path for the descent, and Levi understood that the real test was just beginning. Takakota didn't move. He stood planted in the center of the narrow path, arms crossed, his massive frame blocking the only route down. The other warriors had already descended, their stones delivered, their part in the first trial complete. Only Levi remained at the summit with the giant who'd promised to destroy him. "You're in my way," Levi said through cracked lips. "Then move me." The cowboy's legs shook with exhaustion. His right hand was a mess of blood and torn skin. The weight of the stones pulled at his shoulders like an anchor, dragging him toward the edge. He had nothing left to fight with. Takakota knew it. The smile on the warrior's face said he knew it. Levi looked past him down the path where it narrowed to barely 18 in wide with a sheer drop on the left side. That section was the most dangerous part of the descent, and Takakota stood right before it. Last chance to quit. The warrior said, "Drop your stones. Admit you don't belong here." Instead, Levi did something that surprised them both. He sat down, right there on the path, stones still strapped to his back. He looked up at Takakota with blood-rimmed eyes and spoke quietly. "You can stand there all day if you want. I'm not dropping these stones, and I'm not going anywhere until you move." Confusion flickered across Takakota's face. This wasn't how it was supposed to go. The cowboy was supposed to panic, to try to force past, to make a mistake that would send him tumbling off the cliff. Sitting down wasn't an option the warrior had considered. Minutes passed. The sun climbed higher, heating the red stone. Sweat poured off both men. Below, the crowd grew restless, voices rising in speculation. Kuruk's voice carried up the cliff face. Takakota moved. The trial continues. The warrior's jaw clenched. For a moment, Levi thought he might refuse. Then, Takakota stepped aside, just barely, leaving only the narrowest gap between his body and the drop. Levi would have to squeeze past him, stones and all, with nothing but air on his left side. The cowboy stood slowly, legs threatening to give out. He approached the gap. Takakota shifted slightly, making it even tighter. Levi turned sideways, pressing his back against the warrior's chest, feeling the heat radiating from the massive body. His boots found the edge of the path, half his heel hanging over empty space. One push, Takakota breathed in his ear. That's all it would take. Levi's heart hammered. His burned hand gripped the stone wall to his right, blood making it slippery. He slid one foot forward, then the other. Inch by inch, he squeezed through the gap. Takakota's body was solid as the cliff itself, offering no give. The warrior's breathing stayed calm, controlled, while Levis's came in ragged gasps. Then he was through past Takakota, on the open path again. He didn't look back, didn't waste energy on anything except moving down that mountain. His legs were wooden posts. His vision tunneled. The stones felt like they were crushing his spine, but he kept moving. When his boots finally touched level ground, he dropped to his knees. Someone cut the straps on the stone sling, and the weight lifted away. He couldn't make his lungs work properly. Black spots danced across his vision. Hands touched his shoulders. Small hands, the scent of sage and smoke. Kiona knelt beside him, her face close to his. She said nothing, just looked at him with those dark eyes that had started all of this. Her hand brushed his torn palm and he felt her fingers tremble. First trial complete, Kuruk announced. The outsider stands. The crowd's reaction was mixed. Some showed grudging respect. Others looked angry that he'd survived. Takakota descended last, his face dark with barely contained rage. Second trial, the chief continued. We'll test courage. At sunset, each warrior must enter the canyon of dead trees and retrieve a specific item I have placed there. You will go alone. You will go unarmed. You will return with proof, or you will not return at all. Murmurs rippled through the gathering. Levi had heard stories about that canyon. Animals went in and didn't come out. The trees were bare and white, stripped of life by something no one could explain. Even the warriors looked uneasy. Takakota stepped forward, his voice carrying clearly. And if the outsider fails to return, if the canyon claims him, Kuruk's expression remained neutral. Then the spirits will have made the choice we could not. Kiona's hand tightened on Levi's shoulder, and he understood what she couldn't say aloud. The second trial wasn't designed to test courage. It was designed to kill him. Sunset painted the canyon entrance in shades of blood and copper. Levi stood at the edge, looking into the throat of dead trees that stretched before him like bones scattered across the earth. The 12 warriors had already entered, disappearing one by one into the pale forest. Takakota had gone first, moving with confidence that bordered on arrogance. Now only Levi remained outside. Kuruk approached, holding a small leather pouch. Inside this canyon, I have placed 13 carved stones. Each bears a unique mark. You must find yours and return before the moon reaches its peak. 4 hours no more. What makes this place dangerous? Levi asked, studying the white trees that gave the canyon its name. Rattlesnakes nest in the hollows. Cougars hunt in the rocks above. The terrain is broken, full of hidden drops and unstable ground. Men have died here. Kuruk's expression remained unreadable, some by animals, some by falling, some simply never return. The chief handed him the pouch. Inside, Levi found a small piece of charcoal and a scrap of cloth. Your stone bears this mark. Kuruk showed him a drawing, 3 parallel lines crossed by a diagonal, simple but specific. Levi tied the pouch to his belt and stepped into the canyon. The temperature dropped immediately. The dead trees blocked what remained of the sunlight, creating deep shadows that moved wrong, playing tricks on his eyes. His boots crunched on brittle branches that covered the ground like a carpet of shattered bones. The canyon floor was a maze. Paths split and rejoined, leading between clusters of white trunks that all looked identical. Within minutes, Levi lost his sense of direction. The walls rose steep on both sides, blocking any view of the sky except for a narrow strip overhead. He understood why men didn't return. This place was designed to swallow you. A rattling sound froze him mid-step, 3 FD to his left. Coiled in the hollow of a dead root, a snake watched him with flat black eyes. Its body was thick as his forearm, patterned in brown and tan that had been invisible until it moved. The rattle continued its warning, a dry sound that raised the hair on his neck. Levi backed away slowly, never taking his eyes from the snake. His heel caught on a branch, and he nearly fell. The snake's head rose, tracking his movement. He held his breath until he'd put 20 FD between them, then turned and kept moving deeper into the canyon. The stones had to be hidden in specific places. Kuruk wouldn't have scattered them randomly. Levi started checking anywhere that offered natural shelter, under overhangs, in the crooks of fallen trees, behind rock formations. He found 3 stones that weren't his. Each time he carefully memorized the mark and moved on. An hour passed, then 2. His hands were cut from moving sharp rocks and thorny branches. The shadows grew darker. Somewhere above, he heard the scream of a cougar, that terrible sound that mimicked a woman's cry. It echoed off the canyon walls, making it impossible to tell where the animal actually was. Then he saw it. A stone wedged in a crack at the base of a massive dead tree. He pulled it free and turned it over. 3 parallel lines crossed by a diagonal, his mark. Relief flooded through him, but it was short-lived. Getting in had been hard. Getting out would be worse. The light was nearly gone now, and he'd taken so many turns that he wasn't certain which direction led back to the entrance. A sound reached him through the darkness. Footsteps, heavy, deliberate, moving toward him through the dead forest. Levi gripped the stone and pressed himself against a tree trunk, barely breathing. Takakota emerged from the shadows, his carved stone already in hand. The warrior stopped when he saw Levi, and a slow smile spread across his face. They were alone in the canyon. No witnesses, no rules, just 2 men and the gathering night. You found your stone, Dakota said softly. Pity you won't make it back to show anyone. Levi's hand moved to his belt, searching for anything he could use as a weapon. Nothing. Kuruk had been clear. No weapons allowed. He was alone with a warrior twice his size in a place where bodies could disappear, and no one would ask questions. Takakota took a step forward, then another. His movements were unhurried, confident they'll find you in a week, maybe 2. If the animals leave enough, everyone will assume you got lost. That the canyon claimed you like it claims all weak men. Kuruk will know, Levi said, backing up slowly. His heel found the edge of a drop he hadn't noticed before. Nowhere left to go. Will he? Takakota's smile widened. Or will he accept that you were never strong enough for his daughter? That nature corrected a mistake she made. The warrior lunged. Levi threw himself sideways, rolling across the broken ground. Sharp branches tore his shirt and cut his skin. He came up running, plunging deeper into the maze of dead trees. Behind him, Takakota's footsteps pounded like war drums. Levi's lungs burned. His legs were still weak from the morning's climb. He couldn't outrun this man, couldn't outfight him. The only advantage he had was desperation, and the knowledge that Takakota expected him to act like prey. He skidded to a stop at a place where 3 paths converged. Takakota's footsteps were getting closer. Levi looked around frantically, then spotted what he needed. The rattlesnake's hollow, the same one he'd passed earlier, marked in his memory by a distinctive bent tree beside it. He grabbed a long branch and jammed it into the hollow, then dove behind a cluster of rocks. The snake exploded from its hiding place, rattling furiously, disturbed twice in one evening. Its thick body writhed across the path, just as Takakota rounded the corner at full speed. The warrior saw the snake too late. His boot came down inches from its coiled body. The snake struck, fangs sinking deep into his calf. Takakota roared, stumbling backward. He ripped the snake away and threw it against a tree where it landed in a broken heap, but the damage was done. Levi watched from his hiding place as Takakota dropped to one knee, breathing hard. The warrior pulled his knife and cut an X across the bite mark, trying to bleed out the venom. It wouldn't work, not with a snake that size, not with that much poison already pumping through his blood. You, Takakota, gasped, his face contorting with pain and rage. You did this. You did this, Levi corrected quietly, stepping from behind the rocks. I was leaving. You chose to hunt me. The warrior tried to stand, but his leg gave out. Sweat poured down his face. His breathing was becoming labored, each breath a struggle. Snake venom was shutting down his body, Muscle by muscle, Levi could have left him there, could have walked away and let the canyon finish what Takakota had started. Instead, he moved closer, staying just out of reach. "Where's the exit?" Takakota laughed, a sound that turned into a cough. "Why would I tell you? Because you're going to die if you stay here, and maybe somewhere under all that hate you'd rather live." The warrior studied him for a long moment, pain and fury wearing in his expression. Finally, he pointed with his knife. "North, follow the wall on your right. Don't deviate." Levi picked up a long branch and broke it in half, then used strips from his torn shirt to bind it into a makeshift crutch. He handed it. "Takakota, can you walk? I don't need your help." "Yes, you do, and you're going to accept it because that's what separates us. I save things that are trying to kill me. It took them nearly an hour to reach the canyon entrance." Takakota leaned heavily on Levi and the crutch, his face gray with pain, his injured leg dragging. The other warriors were already there, stones in hand. They rushed forward when they saw Takakota, voices rising in alarm at his condition. Kuruk appeared, his eyes moving from his injured warrior to Levi and back again. "What happened? Snake," Takakota said through gritted teeth. "My fault, not his." The chief looked at Levi and something shifted in his expression. Respect maybe, or recognition that the cowboy was not what anyone had assumed. He held out his hand. Levi placed the carved stone in it. "Second trial complete," Kuruk announced. Then his voice hardened. "Tomorrow the final test, the test of will. You will fight each warrior against each other one by one until only two remain standing. Then those two will face each other. The winner claims the right to marry my daughter." The crowd erupted in approval. This was what they'd wanted all along. Blood. Proof, a clear victor. Levi looked at the 12 warriors, looked at Takakota being carried away by his brothers, looked at the fists and scars and cold eyes that promised violence. Tomorrow, he would have to fight them all and somehow, impossibly survive. Dawn arrived with the sound of drums. The entire settlement gathered in a wide circle, creating an arena in the dust. 11 warriors stood ready. Takakota was absent, still recovering from the snake bite, his legs swollen and useless. But 11 was more than enough to destroy one exhausted cowboy. Levi's body was a map of pain. His hands were barely functional, wrapped in strips of cloth to hold the torn skin together. His ribs etched from the climb. Bruises covered his arms and back. He'd survived 2 trials through luck and desperation. This third one would require a miracle he didn't believe in. The first warrior stepped into the circle. A man named Nishoba, shorter than Takakota, but built like a boulder. Fists scarred from a lifetime of fighting, he smiled at Levi the way a wolf smiles at a wounded deer. Kuruk raised his hand, "Begin," and Shoba charged. Levi tried to dodge, but his exhausted legs betrayed him. The warrior's fist caught him in the ribs, driving the air from his lungs. He went down hard, and Shoba followed, raining blows that Levi could only partially block. The crowd roared approval. Then something unexpected happened. A voice cut through the noise. "Enough." Takakota stood at the edge of the circle, leaning heavily on a walking stick, his face still gray with pain. Nishoba paused, fist raised. Everyone turned to look at the injured warrior. "This is not our way," Takakota said, limping forward. "Our trials test strength, courage, and will. He has shown all 3. Yesterday in the canyon, I tried to kill him." He let those words hang in the air. "I tracked him like prey, planned to leave his body for the animals. But when I fell, when the snake's poison was burning through me, he didn't leave. He saved me, carried me out of that place when he could have watched me die." Murmurs rippled through the crowd. Nishoba lowered his fist slowly, confusion on his face. Takakota looked at Levi, and something passed between them, not friendship but recognition. "I am the strongest warrior here, the fastest, the most skilled in combat. Every woman should want me." He paused, "but strength without honor is nothing. Power without compassion is weakness dressed in muscle." He turned to face the other warriors. "We tested his body and found it wanting. We tested his courage and found it boundless. We tested his will and discovered it cannot be broken. Perhaps the question is not whether he is worthy of her. Perhaps the question is whether we are worthy to stand beside him." Silence that followed was absolute. Kuruk stepped into the circle, his weathered face unreadable. He walked to where Levi knelt in the dust, breathing hard, blood on his lips. The chief studied him. For a long moment, "My daughter saw something in you that I did not," Kuruk said quietly. "She saw past the surface to what lies beneath. I asked you to prove your strength, but you proved something more valuable. You proved your heart." He extended his hand. "Rise, the trials are complete." Levi took the offered hand and stood swaying slightly. The circle of warriors parted, and Kiona walked through them. She wore white deerskin decorated with turquoise, her hair braided with feathers, her face painted with ceremonial marks, but her eyes were only for him. She stopped before Levi and placed her hand over his heart. "I chose you," she said simply, "not because you were strongest, but because you were true." Kuruk spoke to the gathered tribe. "Kiona has made her choice. The trials have proven his worth. Any who object must speak now." No one spoke. Even the warriors who'd wanted to destroy Levi remained silent. Takakota nodded once, a gesture of acknowledgement, if not friendship. The wedding ceremony happened that evening under a sky painted with stars. It was simple, traditional, binding. When Kuruk joined their hands, Levi felt the weight of everything that had brought him to this moment. The years of loneliness, the scars, the pain, all of it had been a path leading here. 3 months later, they built a small house on the border between Levi's land and the Apache settlement, a place that belonged to both worlds and neither. Kiona taught him her language. He taught her about cattle and horses. Takakota visited sometimes, bringing news from the tribe. His limp gradually fading, the warrior never apologized for trying to kill him, but he never needed to. His presence spoke what words couldn't. On cold nights, Levi would sit on the porch. Remember the day 12 warriors fought for her hand. Remember her finger pointing at him. Remember choosing to accept something impossible. And beside him, Kiona would smile, her hand finding his scarred palm, and they would watch the sun set over land that had witnessed the strangest truth of all. That sometimes the weakest man wins, not by being strongest, but by being brave enough to try. If you enjoyed this story, click the video on your screen now to watch another unforgettable tale from the frontier, where courage and destiny collide in ways you never expected. Don't forget, subscribe and consider a super chat to help us keep bringing you more stories like these. Your support means everything to us.